Welcome to chapter 18 of the book of Judges. Begins, Dan seeks an inheritance. We no longer hear the word judging any longer. These are instances that are basically happening between the last judge and Samuel. Begins, in those days there was not a king of Vasilevs, Basil, in Israel. So, again, mentions this many places here in this last couple of chapters. So, it's obvious that there's going to be a king because it mentions there wasn't one yet. But so this was written quite a bit later. How much later is questionable. I think it's quite a bit later, maybe even the time towards the end of Israel going into Babylon. Now, you may think that, well, why would it be that far in advance? But, I'll show you what I think when we get down to the end of the chapter. But let's just continue here, and it says, In those days, the tribe of Dan sought for itself an inheritance to dwell. For an inheritance did not fall into it until that day in the midst of the tribes of Israel. Dan was down here among these tribes of Israel, and we'll see later that people believe then these people at the end of this chapter moved up far north, and we'll go into that as we go through the chapter. But right now they're right here, and they're Ephraim right next to it is going to be what's mentioned. So they were in the midst of this. And the sons of Dan sent out from their peoples 5 men, Pentagon, the 5 walled structure in Washington, D.C. for the military, Android, into his part. I have their part, and it's really is his part, because Av, too, is a masculine, his, not their. But you would think, well, the sons of Dan, their part would fit better. But I'm trying to become more accurate, maybe as far as literal, and that uses his part. Men of sons of power, so soldiers, from Zorah and Eshtaol. And Zorah and Eshtaol, I believe it, I'm not sure if it has them on here. It doesn't, but it's down in here towards Gaza, where Samson was. And they were sent out to survey the land, as the 7 men that were sent out by Moses to survey the land, and then later Joshua, and to track it, walk through it. And they said to them, the men, go and search out the land. And they came unto Mount Ephraim, unto the house of Micah, and they rested there. Now this Micah, it doesn't say that he was Jewish or he was from any tribe. So we know very little about this Micah, except that he was in Mount Ephraim, and Mount Ephraim is right in this area here. So these men from Dan went over, and they came to Micah's house. And of their being in the house, or by the house of Micah, that they knew the voice of a young man, the Levite. We had that in the last chapter, where the Levite was hired by Micah to be his father and priest, even though it doesn't say that he was really Jewish, because he was an idolater and he had these idols. So exactly what he was is questionable. But these men, they turned aside there. And they said this, so they heard this Levite, and they said to him, who brought you here? And what do you do here? And what is it here? And he said to them, Micah did so-and-so with me and hired me, and I became to him for a priest. And they said to him, well, ask indeed by God, that we will know if our way greatly prospers, which we go by it. So, do us a favor and pray to God. And the priest said to them, the young man, go in peace, Irene, peace. Irene is a name. It used to be common in the United States. I don't hear anybody called Irene anymore. Go in peace before Kyriou. Your way, O thou Sodometer, your way by which you go by it. And the 5 men went and came unto Lysa, or Laish. Now, this is really strange, because later we'll see here that the scholars, everybody believe this Laish is up here in Dan, that they went up there from Dan down here all the way up there. I don't see that in these chapters. I don't know where they get this idea that they went up there, but maybe it's something in the future that I haven't noticed yet. So wherever this Lysa is, and they saw the people in it dwelling in hope. Now, they might have went up there, I don't know. And they were dwelling in hope as the amalgamation of the Sidonians. So there was somebody from Sidon, which makes sense in being up there, because Sidon, let's see if it's on that. Sidon is up here, up in, since the other one has it. Yeah, Sidon here. And there's Dan up there, the northernmost part. And so it's possible these men did go up that way, but I don't know. So we'll see here. But anyway, those people were being tranquil in hope, and they were relying on themselves, and not being able to speak a word in the land, for they are far from Sidon, and there was not a word to them with Syria. So they had to be careful of what they did. They were far away from Sidon. They're apparently Sidonians, Phoenicians. And the 5 men came to their brothers in Zorah and in Eshtaol, and their brothers said to them, well, why do you sit down? And they said, rise up, for we should ascend against them. For we saw the land, and behold, it's exceedingly good. So they come back and, why are you sitting down? Let's go. We'll go attack Lysa. And behold, it is exceedingly good. And you are silent, and you should not be reluctant to go and to enter to inherit the land, which they were told to do by God. Whenever you should enter, you shall come to a people being secure, and the land of broad spaces, for God delivered it in your hand. A place where there is not any deficiency there of a thing as much as is in the earth. And they departed from there, from out of the kin of Dan, from out of Zorah and Eshtaol, 600 men being girded with weapons for battle. So we'll go back, and we see then they're down here. Eshtaol, they're down here. Then they're going up through Ephraim and the mountains, and then maybe going up that far. And they ascended and camped in Kirjath Jearim in Judah. So now we have them coming up to Kirjath Jearim. Now I'm not sure if it's Kirjath Jearim is right over here, right where the J would be, Jerusalem, fairly close to Jerusalem, 20 miles away. On account of this, that place was called Camp of Dan until this day. Now that's certainly not way up north. Behold, it is behind Kirjath Jearim. And they went from there unto Mount Ephraim, and came unto the house of Micah. So now we see them going back. Dan, they're going there. Ephraim is right here. Now I don't know why they got it later up this far for Lysa. And the 5 men going to survey the land of Lysa responded and said to their brothers, did you know that there is in these houses an ephod and teraphim? These are little idols, and a carved image, which may be a little larger, an ephod, something to do with a priest would have, and a molten image. This is all idolatry. So this Micah was an idolater, even though he did have a knowledge of who Jehovah was. Maybe he wanted to become Jewish-like and hired the Levite young man to be his priest and father, hoping that he would become Jewish-like because of doing that. And now, know what you shall do. Okay? And they turned aside there and entered into the house of the young man, the Levite, which was into the house of Micah, and asked him for peace. And Micah was gone, so the young man was there. All these men, whoa. And the 600 men being girded with weapons for their warfare. You can add that to your English derivatives book. Polemika, polemics, comes from that, a war of words. They're being set up by the door of the gatehouse, and they were the ones from out of the sons of Dan. So now, apparently this Micah's had a lot of land, money, people, and so forth. And so these 600 men have come there. And then the 5 men going to survey the land originally ascended. And coming there, they took the carved image and the ephod and the teraphim and the molten image. And the priest, the young man, was set up by the door of the gatehouse, and the 600 men were girded with weapons for warfare. And these entered into the house of Micah and took the carved, now I'm not sure if maybe he's talking about just the 5 entered, and took the carved image and the ephod and the teraphim and the molten image. And the priest said to them, "What do you do?" And they said to him, "Be silent. Place your hand over your mouth and come with us, and you will be to us for a father and for a priest. Is it not better for you to be a priest of the house of one man, or for you to be the priest of a tribe and kin in Israel?" So see, saying this kin in Israel kind of leaves Micah being out of being an Israelite. And it was good to the heart of the priest, cardiac, and he took the ephod and the teraphim and the carved image and the molten image, and he didn't throw them away. He should have burnt them up, tore them up, broke them up. And he entered in the midst of the people. So he brings all these things out, and they take off. And they turned and went forth and put the children and the property and the load before them. Now the children, I believe, he's talking about probably slaves, young people taking as slaves, the property, whatever they could steal, put it in there with their baggage and everything. And they were far from the house of Micah. And behold, Micah and the men in the houses near the house of Micah cried out and overtook the sons of Dan. So they take off after the sons of Dan, and doesn't say how far they went, and they yelled to the sons of Dan when they caught up with them. And the sons of Dan turned their faces, and they said to Micah, "What is it to you that you cry out?" And he said, "Well, the gods which I made, you took." So, see, I just don't see him being Jewish. "And the priest, and you departed. And what is there still to me? And what is this you say to me? Why is this that you cry out?" And the sons of Dan said to him, "Your voice should not be heard with us, and at any time men in severe pain of soul should encounter you and shall add your life and the life of your household." And let's see what this dagger has down below. It says as they're very angry. That's what this meant. Men in severe pain, upset. And the sons of Dan went in their way. And Micah saw that they are too mighty for him, and he turned aside and returned to his house back in Ephraim. Now these men may have went on straight on way up there where it shows Laish, but the other place it sounded like it was by Kirjath Jearim, so I'm not sure. And they took as much as Micah made, and the priest who was with him, and they went into Laish upon a people being tranquil and being secure. Now, said that they were away from Sidon. Well, if they were way up here, they weren't that far away from Sidon. This is right up here. But now if they were down here where Kirjath Jearim was, right where the J is in Jerusalem, then they are a long ways away. That's what I believe. And they struck them that is, those 600 men struck the men of Laish by the mouth of the broadsword, in the city they burned by fire, which God had them to do. And there is not the one rescuing, for it is far from Sidon, and communication is not to them with a man. And it is in the valley which is in the house of Rehob, and wherever that is, they try to show it on maps up north. And they built up the city and dwelt in it. And they called the name of the city Dan, according to the name of Dan, their father, who was born to Israel. And the name to the city formerly was Laish. Now, going back up, I want to mention something that happened with me when Micah, here in verse 24, he says that you took, and what is it? You took they took the idols. And it was years ago when I walked away from the Lord, and I had a smoking pipe shop. And I had a nephew that worked in a electronics company that made tape recorders. And they were the reel-to-reel. They had big reels, and they were really nice. And I wanted one, and I asked him about, if he could get a good deal. He said, yeah, I know a guy that steals them and resells them, takes them out. He works in the factory there, and somehow he swipes them and steals them. And I find one, and I bought it from him, paid $300. Well, then a year or so goes by, and I had the pipe shop, and I'm sitting there, and the guy next door wanted to buy the tape recorder. And he's kind of a rough man. Not somebody you want to fool around with, but so I said, sure, $300. So he says, okay, and he says, I get paid Friday. I said, oh, go ahead and take it and pay me when you get the money. Okay. Friday comes, no money. Next week, no money, no money, no money. So finally I come to him, and he says, just don't worry about it. I'll pay you someday. And if you don't like it, more or less I'll beat you up. So I never got paid. But and I look back, and it was stolen. And I bought it. I shouldn't have bought it because it was stolen. And here, something stolen that goes into my hand is being stolen from me. So it's sort of like I felt like, well, this man, he's an idolater, and they're taking his idols. Well, they're taking something that's really bad. He shouldn't be having. So therefore, he's getting really what he deserved. But now, anyway, going back to where they were up there in this place, wherever they were in this Laish, and they struck them by the mouth of the broadsword, and the city they burned by fire. And there is not the one for rescuing, for it is far from Sidon, which to me shows it's still further south. And communication is not to them with man. So they weren't able to call for help, basically. And it is in the valley which is of the house of Rehob. Now, where that valley is, we don't know. And they built up the city and dwelt in it. And they called the name of the city Dan, according to the name of Dan their father, who was born in Israel. And the name to the city formerly was Laish. And the sons of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. So they become idolaters. And Jonathan, son of Gershon, son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the displacement of the land. Now, I remember originally they were saying that there was not a king yet, so I said, well, it's got to be, this had to have been written later than if yet, so they know there's going to be a king, so that would put it in the time of David. But then, right here, until the displacement of the land, well, the displacement of the land wasn't until Babylon, and it wasn't mentioned ever in the Bible until 2 Kings 24:16, which is towards the end, where they were to go into Babylon. And then Jeremiah 29:20 mentions it, the same word, 33:50 of the displacement, the metakisias. And then Lamentations 1:7 and Ezekiel, I think Hosea. You can look it up in the English to lexical concordance of the Apostolic Bible and see it. So basically, how would they know anything about a displacement unless this was written by somebody at a much, much, much later time? And I don't know if it makes a lot of difference, but I just saw that. And they themselves stationed the carved image Micah made all the days, as many as the house of God was in Shiloh. Now, did they put it in Shiloh, or they just had it up there in Dan up north, or was there a Dan down south? Shiloh was fairly far south by Jerusalem. And it came to pass in those days there was not a king in Israel. And again, reinforces the later writing of the book. Chapter 19, a Levite and his concubine, and we will find out this is the last story in the book of Judges. I think it's 4 chapters. And but now this Levite is not the same as the Levite from Micah, because he's not from Bethlehem. The woman is from Bethlehem. And they will find out all about what happens in this story about this Levite and how it caused a civil war in Israel at that time. Hope you'll join us in the next video seminar, chapter 19. And until then, God bless.